Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to part 3 of this Building Safe and Resilient Communities Using Location Intelligence webinar series. My name is Ryan Landcloss. I'm the Director of Public Safety Solutions here at Esri. I'll be your MC and host for today's webinar, as well as the series that we've been on, where today we're talking about effectively communicating risk and enhancing resilience using the tools of GIS, both to engage the community as well to provide context to the risk analysis and decisions we're making to reduce that risk. For those that have been joining us in this series, welcome to the end of this journey that we're on around building safe and resilient communities. We've been talking about this roadmap to resilience now for quite some time. And while we're focused on the communication aspect today, I did want to take a minute to go back and just visit this series and how this roadmap has really come together, starting with how we understand the nature of risk and vulnerability in communities. What does that mean from a GIS perspective, and why we need to take the geographic approach to that problem? I'll spend a bit of time just again recapping the second part of this series where we talked about designing risk reduction strategies that really address these root causes that we're experiencing in the communities to truly mitigate and reduce risk, change future outcomes as we move forward. And with that, I thought I would just start very specifically back at the beginning and talk about this concept of resilience and why this requires us to take a new approach to the problem. Certainly each of us have a role to play in our organization, within our community, within our agency, no matter where you are in the world. And oftentimes it's easy for us to be so consumed by that one task of what's in front of us that we oftentimes can miss the cascading impacts of our decisions, of our organization's decisions across the landscape, the community that we're serving. And I would say that certainly because of the world that we're in today and the interconnected nature of risk in our communities, that it does require us to work together in a collaborative way, integrating data and decisions that are coming from our partner agencies and looking across these different systems that surround a community, if you will, whether that's the social systems that talk about equity and equality that exist, or the population demographics and makeup. It's certainly looking at the economic systems, that's our built environment, the infrastructure, the financial investments that we're making to increase and reduce risk, and certainly the environmental systems where a lot of us focus, many times naturally go there in our heads, thinking about the things like rivers that provide flood and how we mitigate that flood risk, or thinking about ocean systems and that provides risk in and of itself from storm surge and cyclones and typhoons and the like. But really, for us to be able to build resilience in a community, it requires us to look across all these, to find patterns and discover the relationships that exist between these, so that as we make decisions in one system, we understand the downstream effects of that in other systems. And so this idea of using geography, the science of geography as a way to convene people together, provides us a framework to really derive understanding across these different systems to build the resilience we need. And we look at geography as the science that is enabling this geographic approach to happen. Now, we then spend a bit of time talking about the geographic approach itself. This really is a way of thinking, of solving problems more holistically, of integrating, again, your partner agencies, your data sets, to drive, again, the science understanding using geography as a way to convene information, and to do that collaboratively using maps as a way to understand and find patterns that support multiple objective solutions. And I think that's really important in this case of resilience, as we start to work holistically with our teams, as we start to look across these social and economic and environmental systems, there will certainly be competing agendas and needs. And using GIS and geography and taking the geographic approach allows us to take a more inclusive and multidisciplinary approach to these problems. And this is how we can start to really impact the safety and security, or the resilience, for a more sustainable future in each of our communities. Now, we are definitely talking about the tool of GIS, Geographic Information System, as a way to enable that geographic approach to take place. This is the toolkit that you rely on each and every day inside of your organizations to measure the world around you, whether that's parcels or center lines or streets or floodplains, and to assess what that means in the context of a map, to predict outcomes of decisions or what the data is telling us, that derives that understanding that we need to then start to apply those decisions we're making and designs that we're putting into place to truly drive action. Now, GIS as this tool provides us this process. And again, that's a framework that we can rely on to apply geographic knowledge widely across each of these three interconnected systems of that we've talked about in this series. Now, in webinar 1, we spent some time to really define and look at some of this terminology that I just used as the introduction to the series. Our friends at the Harvard Humanitarian Initiative talked about vulnerability being a function of exposure and susceptibility and the adaptive capacity of our organizations, of the residents, of the population that we serve coming together. And really looking at, again, how all of these play a role in understanding the nature of resilience, the need to build resilience, and where we should focus our efforts to increase the likelihood of changing future outcomes. The second presenter in webinar 1, the NABSIG Foundation, broke that down a bit farther, really helping us understand these different indices that may be around us, whether that's social vulnerability or risk indices or resilience indicators, to understand the definition of each of those, to understand how they interact with each other and are built upon each other, to understand when we should use one or the other in our decision-making process. And also looking then across in the United States, how these indices and data sets are being made available work in different geographies, whether we're looking at county levels or sub-county block groups and the like, to really then to understand and develop a better process, a better way of understanding data that allows us to dig deeper into our communities and start to ask the questions against those three interrelated systems to build resilience. At the end of webinar 1, we shared a bit of Esri technology, the GIS and the geographic approach to that problem being tools like business analysts. So we took a look at how we could do shelter analysis and using these indices and understanding of data to determine shelter location, the need of a cyclone impact. So I would encourage you to go back and watch webinar 1 to really define some of these tools and technologies to understand these indices and to start to see a bit of technology at play. Now, moving forward to webinar 2, we just covered this. Reflecting back, our friends at Direct Relief started us off by talking about the 3 different types of risk reduction and resilience that organization focuses on. Certainly looking at the social vulnerability analysis, so how they can maximize their benefits to those who need it most in the midst of a crisis. I also talked about preparedness, the humanitarian preparedness, to how they design the landscape assistance across an organizational territory, if you will. And they also looked at translational readiness. So how do they enable the network of responders and partner agencies and policymakers with tools and data that really help them ask intelligent questions as they start to design programs and strategies that reduce risk and mitigate impact from future events. Now, they shared tremendous examples looking in California at shelter location and power loss and how that led to allocation of resources and backup generation power and the like to reduce risk in this environment. They also looked at La Palma and the volcano and looking at some innovative use of data and GIS to understand mobility patterns and where there's a need to place resources in a community post-event in the midst of a crisis, but also then to retrospectively look back and understand how that can inform our decisions for the next event when we understand mobility and needs of a community and the movement of people within that community of local assistance. And then we had Aga Khan Agency for Habitat join us and talk about their systematic approach to identifying hazards and risk using GIS at a local community level. Now, this is a framework they developed using GIS technology, and GIS is a fundamental aspect of this hazard and vulnerability risk assessment, or HVRA, as they described. And I love that they shared their indices in the bottom right, where they're talking about certainly the hazard exposure, but then also vulnerability being a function of the susceptibility, the coping capacity, and the adaptive capacity of a community itself. And they shared a few examples from more than 2,500 settlements across 5 different countries, looking at flood risk, again, doing community meetings and engagement to help drive local understanding and to build local data into these decision-making frameworks that allow them to place things like early warning systems and to plan response maps and evacuation patterns that reduce the risk from flood, for example, in the maps that we see to the far right. So I wanted to share a bit of that so we can get to where we are today, because I think it was a nice introduction to the need for resilience, the power of GIS to understand risk, to start designing strategies. And where we are today is how we can start to pull all of that together to take a more kind of final look at how we communicate, how we engage a community together, and the power of GIS to be this convening, collaborative environment for people. And I'm excited to have a series of great speakers with us today to share their story with you about how they're taking the geographic approach to being more effective communicators and using GIS to build resilience in their local communities. We're going to have a great organization, Resilience Mapper, joining us. Rahim is here today to talk about their process of building the map up from the ground, literally involving the community in the process, engaging them in the process. And she's going to share some great communication tools that they're using from ArcGIS story maps and the web environment to really build and engage and mobilize this community of actors together to build local resilience. And then we're going to take a look from the city of Swali. We're going to actually do a replay and a look back at the Esri User Conference plenary from 2019 because it's such an amazing story. And Marcel's going to share their story of, again, convening a community, a local neighborhood coming together, using the power of ArcGIS Hub as a technology to both communicate data, but also to engage local actors and community activists in initiatives that allow us to build local resilience. I think you'll really be impressed with their story as well. And they're great complements to each other between Rahima and Marcel. I'm excited to have both of them with us today. And then we're going to talk about the geographic approach. We'll take a look at some Esri technology. My colleagues Shelby and Olivier will be here talking about ArcGIS Hub, some tools for mitigation planning, some templates to get you started. And then we're going to leave you with a series of resources and example ArcGIS Hub sites globally that we really think will help seed your efforts as you move forward in this last phase of this series of communicating and building resilience. And we'll leave you with a bunch of those resources as we close out today's webinar in this series. So with that, thank you for joining us. I'm so happy to have you with us today. I can't wait for you to meet Rahima and her story of resilience mappers. Rahima, the floor is all yours. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Ryan. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this webinar. Thank you for joining us. My name is Rehma Chibuka, and I'm the project manager at Resilience Mappers. Well, Resilience Mappers is a GIS and an online mapping community that was created in March 2020, and its aim was to provide map data to the aid agencies, the government, researchers, any that may need special data about communities. We've grown to have over 40 remote mappers who contribute to special data, the OSM, the OpenStreetMap, remotely using remote softwares and tools, and a team of 25 field mappers by now, who we hope to keep mentoring and showing them how to provide the map data, as well as grow to a bigger community. Well, the challenge in urban cities is that well, urbanization is good and we welcome it, but it comes with related challenges, and Kampala is not an exception. Now, the most sad part of it is that the citizens in the slums or the informal settlements, we can call them the urban poor, are more susceptible to these challenges. They are more prone to hazard, especially in the health sector, sanitation, education. Could be because the services in the areas are lacking or are not sufficient for the people in there. Now, Resilience Mappers recognizes the need to have special data available from the communities. So we come up and give the data to the community, uh, the agencies, the government, and any other person, like the researchers, students who may have research projects in these communities. We provide the special data to them. Now we engage the communities, in the very communities in these areas, the people in these areas, to map up their areas, but give special data, provide special data about their communities. One, because they understand their communities better or very well, and then second, they get to understand the importance of the community mapping and the solutions that come with the mapping itself to the communities, building sustainability, resilience, and well, containing our communities, containing and providing solutions to our communities. Now we use special data tools and softwares, and most of which are open source because we can readily get them. The community members can readily get them on their phones and provide the data, as well as having feedback, back-to-back meetings with back and forth meetings with stakeholders in these communities, the government, and other non-government organizations that have intervention programs in these communities. So we have meetings on how to provide the data, what kind of data products do they need from the data, how do you give the tools to depending on on what kind of solution they want. So we have meetings, back and forth meetings with stakeholders, village settlement leaders, to see how we can provide what product of data, what kind of special data would be best for the solutions they're thinking of. Now, very recent, we've had a project of mapping health and education facilities in these areas, and this is just a quick story of how our project went, the aims and the tools that we use, the GIS tools that we use to help us come with a solution, come up with products that the people can use in these settlements. This project, first of all, was an action from a notion in the 2016 Humanitarian Summit that local communities, to come up with solutions, to come up with risk-informed solutions towards risk-informed decisions. So, as resilience mappers, decided to have a project running in 11 settlements in Kawempe division. Kawempe is one of the divisions in Kampala City in Uganda, and has over 15 informal settlements, or you can call them slums. Yes, so resilience mapper recognizes the need to have data from these settlements, or have core service points mapped out in these settlements, because well, the communities themselves are need intervention. They need core services provided, because they're insufficient, and some actually lack services, because from the research that we made and the writings from the city council blogs and research articles. Now, since 2020, we've been providing map data. This was basically remote data, which was buildings and roads from these settlements. So we had a team of remote mappers, volunteers, that mapped out buildings and roads using remote software tools and software, including JOSM, that is the Java OpenStreetMap. We have the ID editor, and also accompanied by the hot tasking manager. So we use these tools to have the building footprint. So we had the buildings being mapped by the team, the settlement members themselves, because our team is mostly from the settlement, from the communities themselves. So we had our team map out the buildings and roads, and luckily enough, we had discussions with our authority, the Kampala City Council Authority, which runs the city. And one of our data users named Act Together, which has intervention programs in slums around the whole city and other cities. So we presented our data to them, and then they identified that, well, the buildings and roads are nice, and maybe we could accompany them with the core services, the core services that a community needs for better decision making. So we had to train our members. We train a couple of members in spatial data tools, including mostly field mapping tools, which was the open data kit, which we used to go into the field and collect the data. We also train them in navigation tools for them to help them go through the settlement itself and ensure full coverage. So we had both open source tools and navigation tools to help our team go through the whole 11 settlements. So we trained over 25 mappers to do this. Now, the volunteers that we trained are, like I said, part of the communities themselves. So we trained 6 youth mappers chapters, students from universities that live in these settlements, from 6 universities that are part of the youth mappers chapters. And then we had a local girls and women community, a working group called Tomorrow in these settlements, that looks at empowering women, how they can come up with solutions to develop their societies, develop themselves, and maybe get better lives from the settlements. So we had our team organized in 2 teams of of 5 to 10 that well, first of all, they can learn from each other because most of them were new to spatial data, and well, they couldn't understand so much about spatial data. So we teamed our members to learn from each other in groups of in teams, and then sent them to the field. Well, from the data that was collected, we developed web applications that represent our data. We opted for web applications because they are very interactive, and well, you can have back and forth changes from the data, being that these settlements are dynamic and spatial data is very dynamic. So we chose web applications. We're using the Africa Geoportal, and these are the settlements that were mapped out. These are 15 that are named here, and we had the buildings footprints being represented also in a web map that well, you can easily change the data, you can easily upload more data. It's more interactive, it is more interactive, so it is easier to update the data and send it out to the public for use. So from the data we collected, we had health centers, which included attributes on the data, like who is the operator, what type is it? Is it a clinic? Is it a health center? Is it a pharmacy? So we had all these attributes connected to the data and being represented in the web map. Like I said, it's more interactive. You can just click click on the settlement. You can zoom in, zoom out, and then see which is it a pharmacy? Who is the owner? Is it a a government institution? Is it a private institution? Yes. So then we also have education facilities mapped, also including more attributes on each, like the information. The facility has attributed information and being represented in the web map. So rather than having a series of maps showing the attributes of a facility, we opted that maybe a web map was a better representative, as well as the dump sites. Is it a legal dump site that at the end of the day the city council is going to come and collect the data? Is it illegal that people are just dumping their rubbish, and no one knows about it? So this application helps us to, first of all, update the data, like I said earlier, and as well realize which services have been added, which ones have been removed, like the dump sites, which ones have been cleaned, and the area is clean enough. So it keeps an up to date. It keeps us up to date with the activities in the settlement or the services being provided in the settlement. So we also have a dashboard. We developed a dashboard which is a combination, a whole combination of the data being collected. So in this dashboard you have well, the facilities themselves, you have the settlements laid out here, as well as the statistics of the facilities and the services that are in these settlements. So, for example, if I'm looking at health centers, and I want to say look at one of the facilities, say Kanyanya. So in this dashboard, it will zoom to the settlement that you want to maybe look at, and then here we have the statistics of the facilities that are already existing. So this dashboard, first off, it helps us to give a more graphical interpretation, a more statistical interpretation of the data, and also it's better at visualizing the facilities in there. So rather than having a series of web maps, you can just visit the dashboard and then go through the services. Say this Kanyanya has 7 clinics, you have 3 pharmacies, 2 health centers, just like they're laid out here. You can as well go to the education facilities, the building footprints, so it is more interactive. So we also went ahead and created community maps. These are in static form, like PDF form, where if you don't think you can use the static map, I mean the web map or the dashboards, you can just come here and download a static map. So we have all the settlements that were mapped out laid out here in static form. So anyone who wants to say use the data in field can just come and download the data. So we laid it out in a gallery form. We used the minimal gallery in the Africa Geo portal, which helped us to lay out all the settlement maps here and being presented in here. So it's it is a more static. It is a well hands-on with the local leaders, because we do not expect that these people have the machines and the tools that well they can go to the site and search the web maps and so on. So we shared these maps with the community themselves, the community leaders themselves, as well as provided to the people who are on the internet. So from all that information that we collected, we don't just present it on the sites and well make the maps ready available, but also went ahead and had discussions with the stakeholders, like I mentioned earlier. Well, with this project, we went and met the village local leaders. They're the smallest unit leaders in the settlements, which are village leaders. So they're called local councils, and had a discussion, presented our maps, and they identified that actually the maps were very good. It was a very good idea, and well, in these hard times, the pandemic times, it is when you're sensitizing people to go for immunizations for the diseases, like the children, you have vaccination going on. It is very important they can use some of these tools first to identify potential treatment sites. For example, say a ground, you can use a particular school that the whole village knows that let's meet there and have our vaccination going on there. Let's do this at this point. Let's do this at this point. So it is also easier for them to direct uh, well the agencies that have come to have programs in their societies, in their communities. Also can advocate for services in the settlement, so it gives them a better understanding of their services, and a more tangible way of presenting their advocations. Like it gives them a better an informed it is more of a better informed decision making tool that they can use when advocating for services in these areas, as well as clean up their areas from the dump sites, you know. So this data basically was is going to be used for one, advocating for services like I said earlier, as well as building resilience, because when you have solutions you build resilience in our communities and make them more sustainable. So I think GIS is a very good way of exposing your data, creating solutions for societies, providing data to even the most level society leader that could ever understand spatial data. So just like the maps. So that is one of our most recent projects. And in case you have any questions about our work and maybe want to know about our work, you can email us at resilience.mappers@gmail.com, or you can reach out to our social media platforms, and we can be able to answer you as well as have discussions if you need to know about our work. Thank you so much for listening, and have a great day. Back to you, Ryan.
Rahima, thank you so much. What an inspirational story. Like, I love that as I took away just a couple of notes as you were talking, right? The fact that you are such devoted to engaging the community, right? To giving a voice to those who are often, as you said, disproportionately impacted by hazards and crises, ensuring that they're represented, that you're doing the planning with a more equitable lens across that. Also really appreciate where you left us at the end of that, which is ensuring that the broader community has data that is necessary for input before we even take action, right? We talked about a lot of in the series about understanding, and to get understanding requires us to have data, requires us to do analysis against that before we take action, so we are doing the right things for the right reasons in the right places. And I really appreciate you kind of highlighted the whole kind of life cycle, the geographic approach to that as we talked earlier today. And I love that you're also doing this with local expertise and input. Those who know what's happening locally, they're experiencing it directly and can provide the best input and decision-making support for that. And you're reaching them where they are, right? Not just with digital technologies, but providing paper maps and products, understanding that not everybody has the same access capabilities to the technology. And so you're meeting them where they are with different ways of accessing that data and using the maps and data to really drive that understanding. So thank you so much for sharing that story. It was a tremendous story. And I would encourage all of you to spend some time and look at the story map that Rahima just shared. We'll provide a link to that in the resource section. So again, download the PDF that you see to your right in the attendee panel, or just wait for the email to come after the webinar. You will find that link in there as well. And just a great shout out and partnership to the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team that was played such a critical role in this. It was Rahima shared, using those tools, those open tools to collect the data to put the map together that then allowed this process to really take off. So yeah, thanks to that team as well. And Rahima, thank you so much for joining us today. All right, so I would like to transition to the next speaker and really to continue this idea of community engagement, using the tools just as Rahima described to collect data locally in the field and to convene people around a map in the context of building resilience. And for this, I'd like to turn to Marcel with the city of Zwolle in the Netherlands. This is actually a replay from our 2019 Esri User Conference plenary. We chose to do this again with Marcel because it's such a powerful story as well, to talk about how they started with a simple project, a vision, and how that continued to then just carry momentum in that community as they started to have meetings with decision makers, meeting with local community leaders, convening around maps and data to help them understand why they needed to participate in this data collection effort, and ultimately where it is today, this kind of citywide initiative around building resilience for climate change related to flooding, as you'll see in Marcel's story. So with that, I'd like to turn the floor to the city of Zwolle and Marcel, and we'll reconvene in just a bit to wrap that up.
Zwolle is a city of about 125,000 people, located in central Netherlands. It's thought to be about 1,000 years old. And Zwolle is a wonderful place to live in. And we are doing everything we can to keep it that way. And we believe that with smart technology and data, we can make it an even better place. Netherlands is known for its quality of life, but we also have our challenges. Like many other countries, we are being threatened by climate change. As you probably know, much of the Netherlands is below sea level. 65% of our country is vulnerable to flooding. And my town is even more threatened because we have water coming towards us from many directions. So we need to be resilient to climate change. And GIS is helping us do that. Like many of you, we use our portal to share maps that give insights so we can tackle problems. But it has been mostly used by officials. But what about the citizens of my neighborhood, Stadshagen, which is the lowest area in this vulnerable region? We wanted to involve residents in monitoring the effects of climate change. But we need a new approach. So we created a citizen engagement hub. We created this ArcGIS Hub initiative to support a project we call Senshagen. The name Senshagen is a combination of sensors and Stadshagen. And it's all here. Our important indicators. Here you can find instructions, our apps and maps. And here we have an app, a Survey 123 app, where you can report when flooding is occurring. So this is a shift from the passive open data portal to a proactive collaboration platform. Over the past 12 months, we have been on an amazing journey with our citizens. And in the next few minutes, I'm going to take you on this journey, show what we've accomplished, and more importantly, how we did it. We started here. We wanted to get a deeper understanding of what climate change will mean for Stadshagen. How will temperature change affect us? Will air quality be affected? How will we deal with water issues? My team then decided to create a network of weather and air quality sensors to get some answers. The Royal National Meteorological Institute and the National Institute for Public Health and Environment helped us design the sensors, plan their locations so we could get scientifically accurate data. We started with a small pilot of 5 sensors so that we can show that the technology works. We connected those sensors to a geo-event server and created maps with the data we collected. And now it was time to make my neighbors part of the story. So we organized an informational meeting. The meeting was to begin at 7:45, but at 7:30 the room was mostly empty. And I was really worried. What was I thinking? These are all busy young families, so of course nobody could come. But at 7:45, the room was filled with interested Stadshagen residents, and I was really relieved. And the evening was fantastic. We told them about our goals and the roles of residents in all of this. We showed them the sensors and the data we collected. We showed them how to access the hub so they could keep up with the progress in our project. And they appreciated that we involved them and wanted to work as a community on this innovative initiative. They wanted to participate and adopt our sensors. We rolled out a set of 50 monitors, all connected to the Stadshagen hub, and the data you can access through the open data section. But we had more participants than we had sensors. So we involved students from our local applied university to make more sensors. And on the hub, you easily can find instructions to install these. With the data we are collecting, we can start doing analysis, like identifying heat islands. And Stadshagen is a neighborhood with many elementary school students. So we realized that if we teach the children what they can do about climate change and how useful smart technology is, they will teach their parents, like mine have taught me. We work with many organizations to develop lesson plans. Teachers can find these on the hub and download if they want. We also wanted to apply one of our guiding principles and hand out the map to our citizens. So we organized a hub evening where residents used the Stadshagen hub to make maps and do that with the data from their own sensors. Then they started creating maps of other topics they were interested in, using layers from the open data section of our hub. One person made a map of bus stops because she was under the impression that she lived too far away from public transportation. Another one made a map of trees because he wanted to see where trees had been planted. They saw the capability of the hub to show them what's going on in their neighborhood. And the interest didn't end with that meeting. Our hub includes a Survey 123 app for reporting standing water. Residents began to use it. They had become interested and were using the hub to get involved. And then, something really exciting happened. And it's about this thing. And you may wonder what it is, right? Well, this is a not-a-footer sensor. So now you know. Not-a-footer sensor translates to a wet feed sensor. And it's an inexpensive device that can connect to the hub and report when flooding is occurring. And the coolest thing is that this is developed by engineers living in Stadshagen, who took part of the Senshagen project. They wanted to do something themselves. So they thought, what can we do? And they designed this easy-to-build wet feed sensor, which is easier to build than furniture from IKEA. Residents can buy the parts at low cost and get instructions for building it from the Senshagen hub. And soon, we will have a citizen-built network of these sensors sending data to the hub, expanding our intelligent nervous system. What started as a project became an initiative and is now a movement. Thank you.
Well, thank you to Marcel and the team at the City of Zwolle. I mean, I love that story. I'm glad that we got a chance to revisit that and share that with many of you maybe for the first time. You know, I love the fact that the snowball effect kind of happened where it was, you know, the power of geography and GIS to convene people and to provide the context to why they were doing some of the choices, why they were putting some of the programs into place, why the sensors are being deployed. And the natural reaction is, how do I get involved? How can I be a part of that? And I love that they just continue to use ArcGIS Hub as a way to convene the community together and to take action, and that they, you know, started with a very specific project and a plan, and how that's continued to grow much more in the neighborhood level and now across the city landscape itself. So thank you to the City of Zwolle and the team there for sharing that great story and for joining us again virtually as a replay here in this webinar series. So I think it's a good time to transition. What I'd like to do is introduce my colleague Shelby Hines here at Esri. Let's talk about the geographic approach and in fact, pick up kind of where the City of Zwolle left off, as well as some of the work that we just shared earlier from resilience mappers using ArcGIS Hub as a technology, a way to convene and to bring people together, to promote good communication and engagement. And so with that, Shelby, I'd like to turn the floor over to you, and maybe we could take a look at ArcGIS Hub, how it really starts to bring this community aspect together, this critical component of building resilience. So Shelby, over to you, please.
All right, thank you, Ryan. Hi, everybody. My name is Shelby Hines. I am a solution engineer on the state and local government team out of Esri, Denver. And I'm going to take the next few minutes to introduce you to ArcGIS Hub and walk you through this mitigation planning template. ArcGIS Hub is a citizen engagement platform and a website builder that lives as part of ArcGIS Online. It enables you to organize content around a theme or topic and share it back with your community. We have an opportunity to modernize out of static maps and hard copy documentation, and a digital platform for sharing is more relevant than ever. You can keep your community informed and get them involved, which will ultimately improve resilience. So this is a template that you would deploy from the ArcGIS Hub gallery into your own ArcGIS Online organization and brand for your community, configure with your data and resources, and share back publicly. I will walk through the contents of the site, and then I'll do a quick demo of ArcGIS Hub configuration and where you can find this template. So front and center, an app showing community areas of mitigation interest. So what are we talking about here, right? What are the high-risk areas in the community? Mitigation planning is all about identifying risk and taking action now to reduce future losses. The next section, explore the plan and get involved. First opportunity for engagement is this follow button. If a citizen clicks the follow button, they receive notifications about ongoing activities and projects. The public also has an opportunity to comment on the actual draft plan. And I do want to mention at this point, if you are submitting a mitigation plan or mitigation plan update to your state and FEMA as part of the mitigation planning program, you could certainly meet requirements on certain aspects of the planning process using this site. you'll probably need a document to accompany the site to meet the other requirements. Okay, so we've got a gallery here that links to different aspects of the plan, and these link to the same pages that are shown on the header of the site. You can feature events on an ArcGIS Hub site. So in this case, it's inviting members of the public to join your mitigation meetings. And then the last section of this homepage kind of circles back to how did we get here, right? What are the steps of the mitigation planning process? Who are the partners that we worked with along the way? We link to a mitigation planning overview from FEMA, and then a placeholder for mitigation success story to keep momentum and build on your good work. Next page is the hazard, risk, and data page, where we're showcasing the results of our risk assessment. So an ArcGIS Hub site sits on top of a content library that often contains data, maps, and apps. And so I can filter that content for my community-specific risk assessment results and provide that content through this button. We have data-driven statistics that provide sort of a snapshot or a high-level overview of risk across the community. This community risk app is more interactive, so that I can really explore risk by looking at hazards and assets. So for example, if I want to create maybe a mock transportation spill, I can draw that line and put a buffer around it. And I can see that our EOC is within proximity to that hazard. I can also use an existing hazard boundary, and that'll keep that quarter-mile buffer, and I can see that we have a public school in proximity to that floodplain. These categories for open data are also pointing to filtered content that lives in the content library that I mentioned. What's so cool about Esri Open Data is, as the end user, I can explore the data before ever downloading it. And maybe that answers the question I had in the first place. But I can click on features, and I can filter the data. I can grab its REST endpoint to pull into my own WebGIS, or I can download the data. So moving on to the mitigation solutions page, this is where we explain the long-term and equitable strategies that the planning process has resulted in. And another opportunity to participate. I can explore some of the proposed projects and learn about them through these pop-ups. And you'll notice as I click on a project boundary, its name and location pulls into this survey so that I'm able to fill it in and provide feedback about that particular proposed project. I can also submit a new project idea to my jurisdiction or my community. And then the next part of this page talks about aligning with existing planning efforts. So, the idea of implementing mitigation through other programs and mechanisms. And also think about aligning efforts with comprehensive planning or development planning and showcasing that on this site. The last page of the site is all about how to use this template, how to deploy it, brand it, configure the apps, and then share it back. You can see there are links to resources throughout this page. Also wanted to mention that you can always reach to your Esri account team for support in configuring a site like this. And if you have ArcGIS Hub Premium licensed, you can enable private collaboration so that maybe, with partner agencies or stakeholder groups, and that would be using community identities. And, you know, the planning process is all about bringing the right people to the table. And so here you can do it virtually. And with that, I'll head back to the home page and I'll click on this pencil to open the edit mode of the site. I just want to show you the card options. These are called cards that you have to drag over onto your site to build your content. What I'll do is I'll pull over a map card. And I can point to a map that's part of my content in my ArcGIS Online organization to expose it and display it right on my site. Also want to show you how to access the template. So back on the homepage of my ArcGIS Online organization, I'm going to find this app launcher and launch ArcGIS Hub. From here, I'm going to say new initiative and browse templates. Then I'm going to filter the templates by world or public facing. And I'm going to enter a couple of the keywords. And there it is, ready to be activated and deployed into your own ArcGIS Online org. And so before I hand it back, a couple takeaways. You know, a solid mitigation planning will keep a community resilient. And mitigation plans are a prerequisite for FEMA funding for projects through HMA and BRIC. And the process is important and potentially very impactful for keeping your community resilient. In addition to using GIS as a framework and approach for geographic understanding, when it comes to hazards and risk, you can extend your reach using ArcGIS Hub by sharing your great work with your community, keeping them involved, and creating a destination around your community mitigation planning. And with that, I'll hand it back to you, Ryan. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Shelby, for that great tour of ArcGIS Hub. You know, I love the way you just summarized the impact of using ArcGIS Hub and the reason why in this phase of risk reduction and mitigation for emergency managers and disaster management professionals, it's such a powerful tool, right? It's presenting the story of why you're doing the things you're doing. It's not just showing raw data, but it's putting context to that data, right? It's allowing people to ask questions of the data, to contribute to that. Through initiatives, whether you're gathering input on proposed projects or gathering input for future projects. It's all about increasing engagement and building local resilience for families and households, not just excluding them from the process. So I really appreciate this inclusive nature of Hub and what you just described, and the fact that this is a freely available template. So for all of you that use ArcGIS, you can navigate as Shelby described and launch that template and start to customize and configure it together. That experience in that environment, just like the city of Zwale looked at, just like the Africa Geoportal for resilience mappers, like it's a great place to start and to bring all of this material together and really start to drive that resilience necessary. So thanks, Shelby, for taking the time to introduce us to ArcGIS Hub at a deeper level. So what we thought we would do next is introduce Olivier Cottret to you, and Olivier is going to share some additional resources and ArcGIS Hub sites that exist and kind of give you inspiration, right? So there's a ton of these examples in the community globally that we think will help you as you start to think about how you configure that template, how you design your own engagement strategies, and ArcGIS Hub can play a role in that. So with that, I'd like to introduce Olivier and have him take over the screen and talk us through a few of these examples before we close out today. So Olivier, over to you.
Thanks, Ryan, and hello, everybody. My name is Olivier Cottret, and I work with Ryan as Director of Humanitarian Solutions at Esri. So we just wanted to wrap up the presentations by running you through a few examples of hubs that you might want to take a look at, either for inspiration or to use operationally. So this is a selection of hubs that were built with a particular focus on disaster risk reduction. Let's start with actually a hub of hubs, so to speak. This is the ArcGIS Hub Gallery, where you'll be able to find a huge set of examples of hubs categorized by focus area including non-profit hubs. Another one you might want to look at is the Grid 3 Hub, which is a very fast-growing compilation of downloadable spatial data sets and analytical solutions. There's a neat tutorial video here that runs you through it in detail, but let's just quickly look real quick here. So you see if you click on a country, DRC here, for example, it gives you a choice between data catalog and map. If you click on one of those, you get to the map with a number of options for downloading the data or analyzing the data. So very quick way of accessing and interacting with data that Grid 3 is making available. Oh, and by the way, the URLs to all of these hubs that you're about to see will be included in the resources that you'll have access to through this webinar. Next, we have the FEMA Geospatial Resource Center, so the Federal Emergency Management Agency. This is a compilation, again, of data and analytical resources around a number of disaster types. So if you were to click on any of these, you are presented with a huge data catalog, once again, built around these different types of disasters. Here, you're looking at the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals Hub, which provides information on progress made against the SDG indicators by country. So if you click on any of these goals, you're presented with another map catalog with data, progress data on the various indicators for that goal. The Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, has put up a couple hubs to provide information on food security, for example, and also a hub providing resources to tackle the recent locust infestation that we've been seeing in Eastern Africa over the last couple of years. Here's one that Esri put up in response to the COVID crisis. You can see there that you can actually request assistance if you need technical support or guidance on implementation of geospatial tools for your COVID response. So this is an example of how you can interact and sort of two-way interaction that the hub allows you. If you click on the resources here, you're presented with a number of solutions and data sets again. Here, for example, you've got what are called ArcGIS solutions, which are essentially one-click deployable solutions that deploy onto your ArcGIS Online environment. So if I was to click on here, you're presented then with a page that introduces that solution, and this Deploy Now button downloads all of the templates and the data that's necessary to run that particular solution on your ArcGIS environment. Similarly, but for disasters more broadly, we have the Disaster Response Program Hub. So note here also that you can request assistance and access data and resources. So the disaster response program is set up to help you with search capacity requirements in time of crisis. So if you're in the middle of a response and you need search capacity for licenses, search capacity for technical resources, you can request assistance here, and you can also access a number of solutions and support documents on the hub itself. Most recently, we've been working on the Humanitarian GIS Hub. This will be launched, by the way, during GIS Day this year on 17th of November. So look out for communication on how to register for this event, where we'll have a deeper dive into it than we can afford just now. But know that this is a hub that is specifically aimed at organizing GIS solutions around humanitarian use cases. So by clicking on any one of these resource cards, or on this resource card, for example, you would get to this gallery of applications. Again, these are ArcGIS solutions, as I mentioned earlier, but these are organized around use cases that you can filter to access those resources that you're specifically interested in. And finally, I wanted to point out two regional hubs that focus on region-specific resources. We have the Caribbean Hub here with data, or the Caribbean Geoportal, I should say, excuse me, with data and tools, and that allows you to access community events. So you can use this to join a regional community of practice. And the Africa Geoportal that Rahima mentioned, and which hosts all of the great work, for example, that resilience mappers have accomplished in the past year. So here is the story map that you can access directly from the Geo portal if you want to look into Rahima's work and the resilience mappers work. So that completes our quick tour of example hubs, but do feel free to explore these resources at your own pace. And with that, I'll hand back over to Ryan to close off. Over to you, Ryan. Thank you.
Olivier, thanks for that inspirational tour of hubs. What I take away from what Olivier just shared is that hub is such a powerful tool for general awareness and engagement, but they're also very useful for specific projects or programs that you're implementing, again, to provide the context and engagement necessary to truly be successful. And we also saw great examples of very hazard or incident specific hubs that organize content and data, maps and applications that are specific to the matter at hand. So as you're thinking about how a hub can provide this framework for you to start to implement the GIS tool that you can implement, if you will, think about all three of those different levels, from organization-wide, specific projects or programs, or even hazard or incident specific toolkits. And I hope that you'll find some inspiration between all of those three levels and the tours that you've just seen to really start to build out your engagement strategy with GIS. So I'd like to close with a few additional resources to leave you with today. You'll notice on the list of key Esri technology here, a link to ArcGIS Hub, which is esri.com/hub. That's a great place to learn more detail, to again, explore some lessons of how to deploy Hub, to start really implementing the solutions that Shelby talked about and that we just saw in practice through Olivier's tour. But we also covered a lot of other technology in this series, so I don't want to miss the opportunity here in this final webinar of the series to go back and highlight a few of the key technologies that we've experienced. It can be really impactful as we apply this framework of GIS to building resilience. We talked about ArcGIS Pro. We saw that put into practice by Aga Khan Foundation for Habitat and Direct Relief as they're building maps and engagement and analysis. We certainly saw ArcGIS Align playing a role across all of these phases of this webinar series as a way to convene people in a web environment that powers the environment of ArcGIS Hub as a technology to again, engage people in the process of building resilience. And we also spent some time looking at business analysts, ArcGIS business analysts being a tool through the web that we looked at, specifically drilling in and understanding, asking questions of the data, doing that in a web environment to help us really understand how we should build resilience and focus our efforts in very specific areas in a more equitable way. And I also don't want to miss the chance to reinforce a few training resources. There's a link below to a number of these around the language of spatial analysis. A lot of these tools and topics we've talked about are understanding patterns, relationships, where we should apply resources, why we should apply those resources, how we should distribute those resources more equitably. And so these series of resource links here are a great place to start that learning if you've just now new to GIS, just new to the idea of spatial statistics and analysis. I think these will really help carry you on a journey to build up that arsenal of tools that you have at your disposal to start building resilience in the organization. So with that, thank you so much for joining us today for the webinar. We're so happy that you've experienced this conversation between resilience mappers and with the city of Zwali and with our colleagues here at Esri. We hope you find inspiration as you start to look at ways to communicate and engage with your community on resilience. And please take the chance to go back and watch webinars 1 and 2 of this series as we defined understanding systemic risk and finally how we build strategies to reduce that risk as well. With that, have a great day. Thank you for joining us, everyone.